My business partner's emails. Continued after his death, each one dated tomorrow. The first email arrived at 6:47 in the morning, 3 days after we buried Marcus. I was sitting in the kitchen with a cup of coffee going cold in my hands, watching the pale light come through the blinds when my phone buzzed against the counter. The sender line read, Marcus Chen. The subject line read simply, check the server logs from October 12th. The timestamp showed tomorrow's date. I stared at that timestamp for a long time, long enough for the coffee to turn truly cold, long enough for my wife Ellen to come downstairs and ask if I had slept at all. I had not, but I did not tell her about the email. I told myself it was a glitch, a scheduled message he had written before the accident, some automated system misfiring in the chaos of a dead man's digital afterlife. I told myself a lot of things in those first hours. None of them turned out to be true. I should explain who I am and who Marcus was to me. We built a company together, a cybersecurity firm called Sentinel Analytics. 18 years of partnership, 18 years of late nights and quiet arguments, and the particular intimacy that comes from building something real with another person. Marcus was the brilliant one, the engineer who could see patterns in data the way some people see shapes in clouds. I was the one who talked to clients, managed the books, kept the lights on while he worked his particular magic. We were not friends in the way that word usually means. We were something both less and more than that. We were partners in the truest sense, bound together by shared purpose and mutual respect, and the accumulated weight of nearly 2 decades of daily collaboration. He died on a Tuesday in November. His car went off the road on Route 17, the winding stretch that runs along the reservoir. Black ice, they said. He was dead before the paramedics arrived. I identified the body. I called his ex-wife Linda and their daughter Sophie. I stood in the funeral home and shook hands with people I barely recognized while they told me what a good man he was, how much he would be missed, how the company would never be the same. They were right about that last part, though not in the way they meant. The morning of that first email, I did what the message suggested. I went to the office early, before anyone else arrived, and I pulled the server logs from October 12th. It took me an hour to find what Marcus wanted me to see, a series of access attempts from an IP address I did not recognize. Someone had been trying to get into our client database, and they had been doing it with credentials that should not have existed. The attempts had failed, but only barely. Whoever it was had known our system architecture well enough to get close. I sat back in my chair and listened to the silence of the empty office and tried to understand how a dead man had known to send me here. The second email came the next morning. Same. Timestamp anomaly dated 1 day ahead. This one said, ask David about the Meridian contract. Bring the original term sheet. David Holloway was our CFO, had been with us for 9 years. I had trusted him completely. The Meridian contract was one of our largest, a municipal cybersecurity package worth several million over 5 years. I had signed it myself, or thought I had. When I pulled the original term sheet from the archives and compared it to the executed contract in our files, I found a discrepancy. The payment structure had been altered. Instead of quarterly payments to Sentinel Analytics, the contract now routed 20% of each payment to a subsidiary I had never heard of. The subsidiary was registered in Delaware. I spent that evening tracing its ownership through 3 layers of shell companies. The trail ended at a name I recognized. I did not confront David immediately. I'm not a man given to hasty action. My father was a carpenter, and he taught me to measure twice before cutting. Marcus used to tease me about my deliberate nature, my tendency to circle a problem for days before acting, but he also relied on it. He knew that when I finally moved, I moved with certainty. So I measured, I gathered. I watched David Holloway go about his days with the easy confidence of a man who believes himself beyond suspicion, and I took careful notes of everything I observed. The third email provided context I had not anticipated. The subsidiary was not David's creation. It belonged to a man named Richard Vance, a venture capitalist who had approached us years ago about acquiring Sentinel. We had declined. The company was not for sale, and Vance's reputation for aggressive restructuring made him exactly the wrong kind of buyer. Marcus had been particularly adamant about keeping him at arm's length. I remember the meeting where we delivered our final refusal, the way Vance's smile never wavered, even as his eyes went flat and cold. Some men do not take rejection well. Vance, it seemed, had found another way in. I began to understand the shape of what Marcus had discovered before his death. The emails were not supernatural communications from beyond the grave. They were scheduled messages, prepared in advance, triggered to send at specific intervals. Marcus had known something was wrong. He had been investigating on his own, assembling evidence, preparing a case. And then he had died on a dark road in November, and I was left to wonder whether black ice was really the whole story. Ellen noticed the change in me. She has been my wife for 31 years, and she reads me the way Marcus read data streams. She knew I was not sleeping, knew I was spending too many hours at the office, knew that something was eating at me from the inside. I told her I was having trouble adjusting to Marcus's death, which was true. I told her the company was going through a difficult transition, which was also true. I did not tell her about the emails or about David or about the growing suspicion that my partner had been murdered. I wanted to be certain before I spoke those words aloud. I wanted to be able to prove it. The fourth email changed everything. It contained a single attachment, a photograph that Marcus must have taken himself. The image showed two men sitting in a restaurant booth, their heads bent together in conversation. One of them was David Holloway. The other was a man I did not recognize, but whose face I would later match to a driver's license photo. Keith Burrell, a contract investigator with a reputation for solving problems that existed outside the law. The photograph was dated 3 weeks before Marcus died. I sat with that knowledge for 2 days. I walked through the routines of my life, attending meetings and answering phone calls and eating dinners I could not taste. I thought about Marcus driving home that night, the road slick with ice, his car spinning into the darkness. I thought about the careful way David had expressed his condolences at the funeral, the firm handshake, the appropriate sadness in his eyes. I thought about 18 years of partnership reduced to a body on a slab and a series of scheduled emails. And then I stopped thinking and started acting. My first call was to Marcus's daughter, Sophie. She was 23, a graduate student in computer science, and she had inherited her father's gift for systems. I asked her to meet me for coffee, told her I had some questions about her father's work. She agreed without hesitation. I think she was hungry for any connection to the father she had lost, any opportunity to keep his memory alive. When we met, I told her what I had found. I showed her the emails, the server logs, the altered contracts, the photograph. She listened without interrupting, her face growing still and pale, her hands wrapped tight around her coffee cup. When I finished, she asked me one question. "What do you need me to do?" Sophie's access to her father's personal systems proved invaluable. Marcus had been meticulous in his documentation, and his daughter knew his organizational habits well enough to navigate the labyrinth of encrypted files and hidden folders. Together, we pieced together the full scope of what he had discovered. The embezzlement was just the beginning. David and Vance had been positioning themselves for a hostile acquisition, using the diverted funds to buy up shares from minority investors, building toward a threshold that would allow them to force a sale. Marcus had caught wind of it 3 months before his death and had spent those months gathering evidence, preparing for the confrontation that would expose everything. He had never gotten the chance to use it. The question of his death haunted me. I could not prove anything. The police had ruled it an accident, and the physical evidence supported their conclusion. But the timing was too convenient, and the photograph of David with Keith Burrell suggested a connection I could not ignore. I hired a private investigator, a former federal agent named Diane Marsh, and gave her everything I had. Her first report arrived 2 weeks later. Burrell had been in our city the night Marcus died. He had checked into a motel off the highway, paid cash, and checked out the next morning. The motel was 15 minutes from the stretch of road where the accident occurred. Correlation is not causation. I understood that. But I also understood that I was looking at a pattern, and patterns do not lie. Someone had decided that Marcus Chen needed to be removed from the equation, and they had found a way to do it that left no obvious traces. The ice on the road was real. The curve was real. The speed Marcus was traveling was within normal limits, but a car can be tampered with in ways that do not show on standard inspections. Brake lines can be weakened. Steering systems can be compromised. A man who knows what he is doing can make an accident look like nothing more than bad luck and worse weather. I did not share my suspicions with the police. I had no evidence that would hold up to scrutiny, nothing beyond the circumstantial threads I was slowly weaving together. Instead, I focused on what I could prove, the financial crimes that were documented in black and white. I met with a lawyer, a woman named Patricia Chen, no relation to Marcus, who specialized in corporate fraud cases. I showed her the altered contracts, the shell company records, the timeline of suspicious transactions. She listened with the focused attention of someone who has heard many such stories and knows exactly what to do with them. "You have enough to file civil suit," she said, "enough to freeze assets and demand a full forensic audit. The criminal referral is trickier, depends on whether the DA sees enough here to justify resources. But we can make noise. We can make it very expensive for them to continue." I told her to proceed. I told her I wanted everything done by the book, every filing proper, every accusation supported by documentation. I wanted there to be no room for them to claim persecution or vendetta. I wanted the truth to speak for itself. The next month was a study in patience and precision. Patricia's team built their case while I continued to run the company, maintaining the appearance of normalcy while the net slowly tightened. David must have sensed something was wrong. He became jumpy, prone to long lunches and unexplained absences. I watched him without appearing to watch, noting the patterns, the nervous glances at his phone, the hushed conversations that ended abruptly when anyone approached. He was scared, and scared men make mistakes. His first mistake was trying to delete evidence. Our IT security protocols automatically flagged unusual data access, and when David attempted to purge his email archive one evening after most of the staff had gone home, the system captured every deletion and routed copies to a secure backup. Among the deleted messages were communications with Vance detailing the acquisition strategy, discussions about neutralizing Marcus's opposition, and a single cryptic exchange with Keith Burrell that referenced a problem that needed handling. The timestamp on that last message was 2 days before Marcus died. I brought everything to Diane Marsh. She studied the materials for a long time, her face unreadable. Then she picked up her phone and made a call. An hour later, she told me she had contacted a friend at the state police, someone who handled vehicular homicide cases. He was interested. He had questions about Marcus's car, which had been released from the impound lot and was now sitting in a storage facility belonging to his ex-wife. If Linda would consent to a detailed forensic examination, they might be able to determine whether the accident was truly accidental. Linda agreed. I called her myself, told her what I had found, asked for her help. She had loved Marcus once, had shared her life with him for 15 years before their divorce, had raised his daughter. She deserved to know the truth, and she deserved to be part of finding it. Her voice was steady when she gave her consent, but I could hear the tremor beneath the words. She was afraid of what the examination might reveal, afraid to have her worst suspicions confirmed. I understood that fear. I shared it. The examination took 3 weeks. The investigator Marcus had been working with, Sophie, and I met weekly to coordinate our findings, to ensure that nothing was overlooked, to prepare for whatever came next. The civil case was proceeding on schedule, with Patricia's filings generating the expected outrage from David's attorneys. Vance had hired his own lawyers, expensive ones, and they were working hard to distance him from any wrongdoing. But the documentation was clear, and the trail of money was unambiguous. Whatever happened with the criminal case, the financial crimes would be proven. On a Thursday in February, Diane called me with the results of the forensic examination. The brake system in Marcus's car had been compromised. A small cut in the hydraulic line, barely visible to the naked eye, had allowed brake fluid to leak slowly over time. Under normal driving conditions, the degradation would have been gradual enough to escape notice. But on a cold night, on a curving road, when the brakes were applied hard and repeatedly, the system would have failed catastrophically. It was not an accident. It was murder. The state police opened a formal investigation the next day. David Holloway was brought in for questioning within the week. I do not know exactly what happened in that interview room, but I know that David's lawyer emerged looking shaken and that David himself was taken into custody on suspicion of conspiracy to commit murder. Keith Burrell was arrested the following morning at his apartment, caught while attempting to dispose of a laptop that later proved to contain communications coordinating the sabotage of Marcus's vehicle. Richard Vance was named as an unindicted co-conspirator in the criminal complaint, though his direct involvement in the murder plot remained harder to prove. The civil case, however, proceeded with devastating effectiveness. The forensic audit revealed the full extent of the embezzlement, and Vance's companies were ordered to pay restitution that effectively bankrupted his investment fund. I attended every day of David's trial. I sat in the gallery and watched the prosecutors present their evidence, watched the defense attorneys attempt to create doubt where none existed, watched the jury deliberate for less than 4 hours before returning a guilty verdict. David was sentenced to life in prison without the possibility of parole. Burrell received the same sentence. Vance, insulated by lawyers and the complexities of proving direct involvement, avoided criminal conviction but lost everything else: his reputation, his wealth, his carefully constructed image of legitimate success. The last I heard, he was living in a rented apartment in another state, working as a consultant for a company that did not know or did not care about his past. The company survived. We rebranded, restructured, brought in new leadership to replace the people who had betrayed us. Sophie joined the board of directors, bringing her father's vision and her own considerable talents to bear on rebuilding what had been damaged. I remained involved for another 2 years before stepping back, handing the daily operations to people I trusted, people who had proven their loyalty in the crucible of those difficult months. Ellen and I moved to a smaller house near the coast. I spend my mornings walking on the beach, watching the waves break against the shore, thinking about the men we become through the choices we make. I think about Marcus often, about the partnership we built and the price he paid for his integrity. I think about the emails that saved me, the scheduled messages that reached out from beyond his death to guide me toward the truth. He had known something was wrong. He had known he might not survive his discovery, and he had prepared, with the same meticulous care he brought to everything, a path for me to follow when he was gone. The last email arrived on what would have been the anniversary of his death. I had almost stopped expecting them by then, had almost convinced myself that the scheduled messages had run their course. But there it was, waiting in my inbox when I woke that morning. The timestamp showed tomorrow's date as always. The message was brief. It said, "Thank you for finishing what I started. Take care of Sophie." And then, at the end, a single line that I have carried with me ever since. "We did good work together." That was enough. I sat with that message for a long time, reading it over and over, feeling the weight of everything it contained. Then I closed my laptop and went to find Ellen. And we walked together down to the water, and I let the sound of the waves wash over me like a blessing or a benediction. Some debts can never be repaid. Some partnerships never truly end. I learned that in the months after Marcus died, learned it in the slow accumulation of evidence and the patient pursuit of justice. I learned that betrayal is a poison that seeps into everything it touches, but that truth is its only antidote. And I learned that the measure of a man is not what he achieves in life, but what he leaves behind, the seeds he plants in the hearts of others, the work that continues when he is gone. I am an old man now, or close enough that the distinction hardly matters. My hands shake sometimes when I hold my coffee cup. My knees ache on cold mornings, but I sleep well at night, better than I have in years. The company thrives under Sophie's leadership, protecting the systems and data of clients who never knew how close they came to betrayal. David and Burrell will die in prison. Vance will live out his remaining years in obscurity and regret. And Marcus Chen, my partner, my friend in the truest sense of that word, lives on in the work we built together and the justice we achieved in his name. Some stories do not have happy endings. This one does not either, not really. A man is dead who should not be, killed by greed and the casual cruelty of people who valued profit over human life. No verdict can undo that. No sentence can restore what was lost. But there is satisfaction in the truth, in the knowledge that the record has been set straight, that the lies have been stripped away, and the guilty have been named. There is peace in knowing that I did what Marcus needed me to do, that I finished the work he started, that his death was not the end of the story but a transition, a passing of the torch to hands he trusted. I think about that sometimes, about trust and what it means. Marcus trusted me to find the emails he had prepared. He trusted me to understand their significance, to act on the information they contained, to pursue the truth with the same patience and precision that had defined our partnership. He trusted me not to give up, not to accept the easy explanation, not to let his killers escape consequence. That trust was his final gift to me, and I hope I honored it. I hope, when my own time comes, that I will be remembered as a man who kept faith with those who depended on him. I hope my children and grandchildren will know that their father and grandfather was someone who stood for something, who did not look away when the world showed him its ugliness. The beach is quiet this evening. Ellen is reading in her chair on the porch, her face soft in the fading light. The waves keep their eternal rhythm, advancing and retreating, smoothing the sand, washing away the footprints we leave behind. I stand at the water's edge and let the cold foam lap at my feet and think about all the years behind me and all the days ahead. I think about Marcus and David and Vance and Burl, about Sophie and Linda and Patricia and Diane, about all the people whose lives intersected with mine in the wake of that November morning when the first email arrived. I think about the choices we make and the consequences we accept in the long, slow work of building something that matters. And then I turn and walk back to the house, to my wife, to the life we have made together. The sun is setting behind the dunes, painting the sky in shades of orange and gold. Somewhere out there, the world is full of scheming men and secret deals and betrayals waiting to happen. But here, in this moment, there is only the sound of the waves and the warmth of the light and the quiet certainty that I did what needed to be done. That's enough. That is more than enough.